Well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Stanley Johnson, the polymath. I hope you don't mind me laying these plaudits at your feet, Stanley, who's very welcome and you can use the word esteemed twice now, esteemed member of the advisory board, but you're also an esteemed author. And we'd like to ask you, how do you handle the creative process when you're writing, and what are the key life lessons you've learned along the way in your creative experience? If you could respond.
Yes, well, it is true that writing has been quite a large feature of my life. I started off by being a classicist. How should I put it? You know, Greek and Latin, as so many of my generation were. But at Oxford, I changed halfway through from doing classics to doing English language and literature. And I think that was partly stimulated by the fact that I won, while I was at Oxford, the Newdigate Prize for Poetry, which is not always given once every few years. And, you know, some of the people who have got it have gone on to be rather well-known poets, like Oscar Wilde and Matthew Arnold and so on. Well, I didn't, unfortunately, ever rival them. But that sort of kicked me off. And as a result of that, I went off to America, to what was then one of the pioneer schools of creative writing, which was the Writers' Workshop at the State University of Iowa City. And that was set up actually by Paul Engel, but he had a lot of good poets there. I didn't spend there long enough for reasons I don't want to go into. But I've managed, as it were, to combine a life of mainly international environmental work with continuing to write. And so as I come to the end of this writing career, I think I'm probably fair to say I've done 10 novels, 12 other books, or 13 other books, and 2 volumes of memoirs. So there it is. How do I do it? Well, you know, the ideas flow, and you try and get them on paper.
Yeah, definitely. Do you find, sorry, just to enlarge on that, really, and expand, do you find that the process of writing, well, I heard the other day someone say they don't know what they're going to write until they start writing. Does the process take over and have an energy of itself sometimes?
That's a very nice question. Yes, I sometimes say, well, the thing to do, if you think you're suffering from a writer's block, sit in front of a screen, or not a screen, a typewriter, press a button, see what the first button comes, and then make a word of that first, and then the word would make a sentence make a paragraph, paragraph make a chapter. Well, I tend to be plot-driven more than character-driven. Now, the ancient tragedians, I think I'm talking here about, you know, Aristotle and people like that. Not that he wrote tragedies, but he studied it. There was a theory that character is plot. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And I haven't ever reached those heights. I think I am plot-driven rather than character-driven. I long to write in a book, in the end, write a book where it's the character who drives the action, like Oedipus Rex or whatever. But I'm plot-driven. I'm fairly good at thinking up plots. As far as I'm concerned, the more ingenious the plot, the better.
Very good. And Compromat was a current, it was a current novel. And so have you finished on, are you working on a novel now that kind of taps into the terrible word, the zeitgeist?
Yes, I wish I was. Oddly enough, there's rather a nice publishing house called Black Spring Press, which is run by a gentleman called Todd Swift. And Todd is actually just publishing 3 of my backlist. He's publishing, came out last month, a book I read called The Virus, which is fairly topical.
Yes.
In the present circumstances, but I wrote it 40 years ago. And he's publishing another one called The Warming, which again is fairly topical. It's all about global warming. I read that 20 years ago. And finally, he is publishing one called The Anomaly, which is, as it were, the third in this set of 3 thrillers. I'm tempted to call it a trilogy, if you see what I mean. Wouldn't it be nice to say I was working on another novel? Compromat came out a couple of years ago. I wouldn't say I have another novel in plan. I vaguely have a thought that I might try and produce rustle through the old files and see if I could dig up enough old poems to make a slim volume of poetry. But that, I think, is a fairly hazardous thing to do.
Yeah, we'll be very happy to showcase some of those in the London magazine, I think, if need be. So moving on to the next question then, Stanley. So you attended Exeter College, and how do you think that the landscape of higher education has changed since then, since you attended university? And then perhaps also, how might it change given the COVID pandemic?
Well, I wish I was really up to speed with the modern universities. I mean, 6 of my children, actually, I ought to say, to be accurate, I would say my 6 children, they've all gone to, well, 5 went to Oxford, and 1 started at Cambridge and then went on to UCL. I suspect that their experience was quite similar to mine, if you see what I mean. But then I don't necessarily think that is where the current generation is. I mean, maybe this is a little slice of the university experience. Where is it going? I think it's obviously going to have to survive the COVID crisis, and I think that, you know, one of the things which has happened is there's been this great, as far as the universities are concerned, there's been this great fall off of foreign students, and they are going to have to compensate for that. Now, you could say this is a two-edged sword, and English people, British people who weren't otherwise going to get to the university may find their places they wouldn't otherwise have had. On the other hand, the universities themselves are going to be hard pushed financially without the contribution of the foreign students.
Yeah, of course. Yes, indeed. Thank you, and also the question, the next question. You've worked with with a number of global institutions, both as an MP at the World Bank, EU Commission, and how do you see the landscape for these multinational institutions now?
This is very interesting. I think much will depend, honestly, on the results of the next American election. And at the same time, we see Britain withdrawing from the EU. And then let's not forget that the EU played a very important role collectively in the climate change debate, particularly leading up to the Paris Convention in December 2015. And I do worry that Britain's absence will be sorely missed there. And I want to see what other solutions we're going to find to cooperate with Europe, not being in the EU. It's going to be very tricky, that one.
It is, isn't it? Being tricky, being European, essentially European, but not being in the EU. We've got to remake all this stuff again.
Stephen, I've been arguing that we at least ought to stay within the European Environment Agency, which I helped write 25 years ago.
Yes, of course.
And that is open to non-EU countries. Norway is a member, Turkey is a member, Switzerland is a member, other countries like Iceland and Liechtenstein are members. And I would very much hope that if we do have a deal with the EU, that at least we stay members of that. And even if we don't have a deal with the EU, we could still stay a member of that. And so these are things which are very much on the cards at the moment, and the cards are falling quite quickly. I think we've got 3 or 4 weeks now of the discussions with the EU to sort some of these things out.
Absolutely. It's imperative. Thank you for that as well. Well, and the last question is something about GBS itself, Stanley. I mean, do you think that GBS is doing an effective job with our efforts and contributions to our students and the community?
I do. I think it's a tremendously important institution with a tremendously bright future ahead of it. I feel honoured indeed to be a member of the advisory board. These are people who have mainly have the whole of their lives ahead of them, and the kind of information and the kind of education which they're getting at GBS, I think, is going to point them very much in the right direction. I think also the GBS is hitting on sectors of society who are not always being reached by the other educational institutions we have in this country.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Stanley.
Well, thank you, Stephen.